Rick Becker, you were up first. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, you had mentioned the twisting of wires in the tone arm. Are you talking about the wires internally in the tone arm, or coming off the back end of the tone arm, or between the tone arm and the cartridge?
Both. Sometimes, many tone arms don't have any exposed wires at all until it comes out as the cable. I have seen instances where the tone arm wires inside and hidden to us of the tone arm have been either misrouted or they're heavily twisted. Of course, we learned about this after the fact if we send it back to the manufacturer to say, hey, tell us what's going on here. But more often than not, it's going to be with a tone arm like the 4-point or the 4.9, where you've got the loop coming out, or the VPIs, where you got the loop coming out. That puts can put a lot of pressure, horizontal pressure on the arm, a lot. And the more it gets worse, the heavier that insulation is, the more likely it is to do that. So you want really fine, lightweight wire, ideally, to avoid that.
In many cases, I've seen the tone arm, the cartridge wires between the tone arm and the cartridge have been like twisted into a bundle to keep them, I don't know what, but is that a good practice?
Between the cartridge and where it enters the tone arm?
Yeah, the tiny little tone arm wires, yeah.
I've never seen that.
As opposed to having them go off in 4 different directions, they kind of twist them into one kind of uniform cable. I think the premise was to try and avoid some RFI. If I'm not mistaken.
That would only work if there's a common mode rejection opportunity, and that will only happen if you're running a balanced input on your phonostage. If you're running a balanced input on phonostage, then you want uniformity with that twist, right? Because then you want all 4 wires to be equally infected, right? So that there is common mode rejection. But if you're not running a balanced phonostage, then it will probably have little to no effect.
Right, and I have a Lino C with a balanced cable, so I'm running fully balanced from the cartridge to the phono.
I got one right here.
And and my tone arm wire is very fine and very twisted, but it stays balanced all the way through to the phono stage.
I should have also added that I do have this Lino C 3.0, which I'm still getting familiar with, and I think is a fantastic value.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have the older one, the 2.0, but I think it works well if you have the right cartridge. I guess the 3.0, you can add, it's a little more functional with different impedance cartridges and different output cartridges.
Yeah, exactly.
So with the one I have to pick a low impedance cartridge, period, end of discussion. But that's okay, because there are lots of good ones out there.
Yeah.
So, Rick, were you done with your question? Okay, Don, you want to ask?
Hi. So I have my dealer is Bruce Heimberg at Stereo Unlimited. I just retained got a fairly new VPI Prime turntable with the new Fat Boy tone arm and the Lyra Delos cartridge. Sounds great. I have last number 9. He says use this almost every side. And then after every 5 or 10 sides, I have last number 4.
Yes, wow.
And then about every 20 times to use last number 5.
Oh, geez, I don't even know the differences of all these.
I don't either. But I also do have a little dry horsehair brush. So if I see a lot of if I see a lot of dust, I'll use the horsehair brush, and otherwise I'll use the number 9. And it's interesting, excuse me, that even after one side play, I can sort of see the cantilever and the stylus. And then when I give it one little brush with any of these fluids, it almost disappears. I can't even see it. So that's how much dirt was on there. Now, am I accumulating any crud on my stylus with using these? I would think not.
Well, I certainly hope not. I don't know enough about any of the contents, you know. So yes, we did send samples off of the gel cleaner, a couple of the gel cleaners for
I've never
infrared.
heard of a gel cleaner.
Oh, okay. Well, good. We sent them off for infrared spectrometry to understand what the materials are and to determine whether they're more likely to be transmissible of their material to the stylus after UV exposure or heat exposure or time, right? But I won't be able to do that same type of testing on all of the stylus cleaners. I don't really care for being consumer reports because it puts a target on your back, and can make some enemies as well. And that's not what I'm in to do this, but I saw too much of this not to say something with regards to the Onzo. I saw too much.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get something vinylized, so I've been trying to find mastering places. Red Spade Records in Ottawa, Canada, is a woman. She's the only female cutter in all of Canada, and she cuts one LP at a time. She does not press. If you hire her, she's going to cut you one new LP piece of vinyl at a time.
Yes.
And then I'm in San Diego, and just up the road from me in Santa Ana is Sound Affair Mastering, owned by a guy named Ron Leeper. And he's done work for a lot of the big labels, and looks like a beautiful layout that he has. Is anybody here familiar with any of those, or you've heard of any of them? Or and generally, the world of vinyl is certainly expanding and growing because both of these two places have a 6-month backlog. If you want to get something pressed or cut from any of them, it's a 6-month waiting list.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, the entire production industry is way behind. They're stacked up for a long time. And everything's in short supply. The lacquers, the styli, the tapes, even the tapes for the main recording. Those are getting harder and harder to get. In fact, I was told by one person that the price of the blank tape has gone up 25% in the last year. Everything's in short supply. Yeah.
So I have a question about the quality control and the fact that there are only 3 manufacturers.
Three main ones, yeah.
Three main ones.
There are some cartridge manufacturers do their own Stylus cantilever assemblies, like I'm drawing a blank. It's all made from ceramics, and it's quite expensive, exquisite.
How do the cartridge manufacturers do quality control? Do they, obviously, if I'm a micro ridge stylus on a boron cantilever is going to be expensive, they can't very well just like look at them and throw out 50% of them because they're not quite aligned correctly.
Right.
What do they do about that?
Well, so I know that I don't know about all of them, but I know, like, for example, Lyra, those guys really care about the product they're putting out, and they do everything that they can to inspect everything that comes in and make sure that it is within Namiki or Agura's agreed upon tolerances. And unfortunately, they, like everybody else, as far as I've been able to tell, with a possible exception of Ortofon and maybe Soundsmith, don't have a means to measure the relationship between the contact edge and the cantilever. That's the zenith error, right? What they look at is larger features, which are easier to see, right? Like the diamond block. I showed you guys the diamond block. They'll make sure that's aligned properly. Or the stylus shank itself when you're looking straight down on it from its zenith. But seeing the contact edge and illuminating that contact edge is tough. And also have that contact edge in focus with simultaneously with the cantilever. That's the tough part. Mm-hmm. So I don't know about Geiger, but I do know about the other two on the Zenith. Like I said, plus minus 5-degree tolerance on the Zenith. Usually it's around 3 degrees on the other axis. Yeah, because I've seen styli where the shank was mounted nicely, diamond block was mounted nicely, but the stylus wasn't cut very well. So the contact edge is not an orthogonal relationship with the stylus shank. Or I've even seen a few where the left channel and the right channel, instead of, when you're looking straight down on it, it looks like a straight line. But I've seen this.
Mm. So, you said it's a miracle that we can get any sound, or that we can get such good sound out of the grooves. It's a miracle that these styluses, particularly the hyperellipticals, can be manufactured and polished correctly in the first place. I mean,
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, but the technology for micro machining has apparently gotten a hell of a lot better in the last but 12 years.
Yeah, but they've been making those since quad records back in the 70s, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if they're still using the same machinery from back in the 70s or not. I don't know, but God, I see that there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, Arnie, go ahead. I'm sorry, Arnie, go ahead.
Yeah, what it seems to me from what you demonstrated, how the various stylus configurations touch the groove, the only stylus that has any chance of getting all the information out of the groove is the straight line one that touches. The elliptical and the conical miss a lot of information.
That's correct. Well,
so
it's not just missing the information, it's the induced excursion that they have to the induced excursion that they have to get through the groove at all, right? So with a horizontally modulated stylus with no vertical content, a conical or elliptical, and a fine line that's got a zenith error of any significance is going to go like this. So what it's doing with that vertical motion, it's creating secondary harmonic distortion. And some people might like that, okay? But I don't want it mechanically. Yeah, I've got some single-ended triodes that sound great, and they got a lot of secondary harmonic distortion, but I don't want it at the very outset of my playback chain. So yes, they are. If you've got a conical, definitely. If you've got elliptical, definitely. You won't mechanically get everything from the groove.
So it seems to me that when you said that, some of these things produce something euphonic and so on, my approach always has been sort of analytical in that I want to get everything off the groove that's there, and all this other stuff, whether it's euphonic or not, there are many, many ways of making things euphonic all along the system,
yeah,
including how you treat your room, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
And the other thing is this, we also know the only thing that matters to be accurate is what's at the beginning of the system, because it's going to get screwed up as long you go along the whole path into Never Never Land. Yeah. So I don't see why you would want to make anything euphonic right there at the stylus position, which is the most critical point in the system.
Yeah, and by making it, if you're deliberately trying to get some of that euphonic nature, you're gonna give up other things. You're gonna give up a big soundstage. You're gonna give up pinpoint imaging. You're gonna give up high frequency extension and decay, and you're gonna give up dynamics. And I completely agree with you. There's so many other opportunities to screw things up. Let's not do it mechanically at the very beginning of the chain. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Before I come back to Rick, Paul Pomerantz messaged me that he had a question. Paul, you want to ask away?
Thank you, Mark.
Mhm.
JR,
Hi, Paul.
love your talk.
Thanks.
I have a VPI Aries 1, and I use the VPI jig to set that up. How much am I missing by just setting up my tone arm with the VPI jig versus all the other hoops I could potentially be jumping through?
Oh, that's an excellent question, and I don't know. Wally used to say to me, he said, "Listen, sometimes he said, I love to talk to these audio files. We talked for hours. I talked to this guy today, da 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 da." But when they ask me, well, if I get your tools, Wally, how much improvement will I get? And his answer is always, I don't know how screwed up your system is right now. So I don't know. I can't make that kind of claim. The only claim I can make is that I've got some mechanical certainty with the tools that I do make, right? If you were, let's say you had a Rega, okay? I could be a little bit more specific about that, answering that question, because Rega uses a Stevenson alignment, right? Which I can't find a single good reason to use, because it favors a portion of the record which we almost never ever play at the expense of 95% of every record you have. So that I could answer, and I've measured 1,300 plus record sides to see where that last groove is based on musical genre and date of production. So if it were a Rega, I could give you a better answer, but I'm sorry, I can't give you anything specific there, Paul.
Thank you. Maybe in the future you could get your hands on a VPI and play around with it.
Yeah, I haven't.
A lot of people who, a lot of audiophiles own VPI turntables. So,
well, what I can say this: if you're not aligning your cantilever on a mirrored surface, then you're at a significant disadvantage. Sorry, there's a car alarm going. You're at a significant disadvantage because when you align for parallelism between the cantilever and your alignment mark, how do you know that your eye is in the right position to assess for parallelism? That question is called parallax error. So with a mirrored protractor, you first get your eye in the right position by aligning visually the alignment mark and the reflection of the alignment mark. When they come into position like that, then you know your eye is in the right position to assess for cantilever alignment. But if they're like this and you don't know it, you could align your cantilever very differently.
Rick, did you have your hand up again? Do you have another question?
Yeah, following up, kind of unlike what Arnis was talking about, when the stylus goes through the groove, I can understand why there are physical limitations that it doesn't pick up all of the information. But is it also a case that there are like microseconds in which case the stylus is actually disconnected with one wall or the other?
Okay. So I am aware that Peter Letterman, who I already said I've got a lot of respect for, has talked about this stylus jitter, and it sounds very plausible, but I'm not aware of any proof. It sounds plausible, right? But I want to see some proof.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Now, JR, going back on, you were talking about listening for the difference between a 33 and a 45 on particularly on the inner grooves, and that was for correcting the zenith error.
That was for evaluating for the possibility, because it's
okay.
You've got significant zenith error.
Okay, and Of course, there's the issue of the groove velocity in the first place. Are you listening to the inner grooves because the inner groove, because at the outside of the record, the velocity is so much greater anyway? And
I would put it slightly different.
okay.
Differently. First of all, it's the inner groove area of the 33. I don't care where it is on the 45. Okay. There's the innermost groove of the 33 that you can get. The closer to get to the label, the better. And yes, the reason for that has to do with signal density per a unit of measure. So to play, to play the duration of a quarter note over on a 45 RPM record at the outer area of the record, that's a lot of groove. But to play that same quarter note on a 33 RPM towards the interior of the record is much shorter, which means that the peaks and undulations of the groove content are much closer together. Remember, it's the stylus doesn't change sizes or much alignment between the outer and the inner. So it's going to see the terrain in a different way when it's densely packed, and will increase the probability of that vertical excursion on a horizontally modulated groove. And by the way, if you've got a perfectly vertically modulated groove, which is an out of phase left and right signal, by the way, with a stylus with a zenith error, you would get left and right. It forces that. So they both work in tandem.
Mm-hmm. So the idea of me getting out a 33 and a 45 and going back and forth while I change the offset angle of my tone arm, and then listen again and make some notes, and then change it in the other direction and listen again and make some notes. I mean, my head is exploding. That's not the way I want to live my life.
And I don't like subjective tests for something that can be measured mechanically either. And I'm just trying to give my best idea I got, mm-hmm. to do it as cheaply as possible, to assess for the possibility of zenith error. Right? Mm-hmm. And if you can discern if there's a big difference on those parameters that I mentioned, soundstage, imaging specificity, et cetera, between the inner 33 and anywhere on a 45, then yeah, can you then put away the 45 RPM record if you feel that there's this big difference, and then focusing just on the 33 and on the innermost tracks, you can begin experimenting if you like. It makes me uncomfortable to say I'm the only one that I know of right now that can measure zenith. So I'm trying to get a way out. Right. And yes, I'm working on a solution. So that's the impetus behind that.
So that brings up the question: what we haven't even talked about the tools that you make to do this stuff. Do you want to like give us a rundown of the products you offer?
Well, the two basics are the Wally tractor, which is the protractor, right? And it's good for any arm, even a linear tracker. And why would you want it on a linear tracker? Well, you still want to use a mirrored protractor to align that cantilever properly, because if that's off, then let's say if your cantilever is off on a linear tracker 1 degree, 2 degrees, it's going to be 2 degrees off the whole way, or 1 degree off the whole way. Whereas at least with a pivoted tone arm, it has a chance of being right at least twice somewhere, right? And the Wally skater, that's the other basic item. The Wally skater and the Wally tractor are the two elemental ones. This is the device used to measure horizontal forces on the tone arm. and is, Wally used to call it his Trojan horse, because when you go to the shows and the various dealers or manufacturers would ask him to come in and evaluate their setups in advance of the show opening, he's basically like, are you sure? Because I'm bringing my Wally skater and we could find problems. I was with them when we found one turntable by this manufacturer that was unplayable because it had this powerful force that we couldn't counteract. And there's Wally reference, which are a series of blades that are used to do a number of things. For one, perfectly level the head shell with the surface of the record at the height of your cartridge, at your nominal tracking force, and then the single bladed ones, depending on the type of tone arm, to measure what are those angles that you've arrived at for ideal rake angle and azimuth angle, so as to make it repeatable. All right. The Wally Zenith looks very much like the Wally Tractor, but is helped. It is, if you know what your Zenith error is, then you can purposefully misalign the cantilever to achieve the proper relationship between the groove contact edges and the stylus contact, the groove and the stylus contact edge. I did see one question here from Pete.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it ties into what he's saying. Saying basically, if I'm going to purposefully misalign the cantilever to account for a misalignment between the stylus contact edges, the groove contact edges, if I'm going to purposely misalign the cantilever, aren't I screwing up other things in the motor assembly? Well, eventually you will. Okay, so we did some calculations on this too. If that angle of your correction, your zenith correction, becomes too much, then what will start happening is the groove content will want to, a stereo groove content, will want to push the cantilever in and out. Well, it's not designed to do that. And in most cases, it doesn't do that. But you'd have to get to angles greater than the head shell would allow for that to be an issue. Most head shells will allow 4.5 to 5 degrees of revolution, and that's it, right? So, and the amount of changes to the electrical input that the electrical output that the cartridge motors see as a result of 5 degrees is absolutely negligible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jeff Gross, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I wondered if you would say a little bit about Shibata and fine line styli versus micro ridge and micro line, that kind of thing.
A lot of these are brand names, and I'm not sure what all of them mean. Shibata, that's pretty clear. It's just, basically they're taking a conical stylus and they put a couple facets on the leading edge that ostensibly create a fine line. Shibata stylus are kind of my bane because they're really difficult to measure, even with a good microscope. They have to be illuminated just right. So they're a bit of an irritant for me, but they're certainly better than for playback, as long as you can get them aligned well, than a elliptical or conical. So the other, micro ridge, fine line, these things don't really mean a whole lot. What you'll want to pay attention to in the specs is the minor radius and the major radius. Okay, so I like to see a minor radius less than 5 degrees. 5 microns. All right, and those many manufacturers will publish those. So I like to see definitely less than 5 microns, ideally somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5, ideally. The reason why, and we've modeled this up in finite element analysis. So this 1001 scale model this is a 4-micron radius, all right? And this is the model that we used in the finite element analysis software, this exact Stylus model. What we do see is because of this 4-micron radius, even when this is perfectly aligned, there is a tiny bit of vertical excursion. Is enough to make a difference sonically? I don't know, but we can see it mechanically. Where when we trim it down to 3 microns, there's less.
Okay. So
Right? That's
basically,
why mimicking the cutter head stylus is the ideal. You want to mimic that alignment and those radius.
so basically, in a nutshell, smaller is better because you're getting closer to the contours of the groove. Yeah.
Yes. Now on the major radius, I like to go bigger. 30 micron is a little tight. I've got one playing right now. It sounds great. I'm not saying it's bad. It's why do I say it's tight? And it has nothing to do with the way it sounds. I'm sure I couldn't tell the difference between a 70 micron major radius and a 30 micron major radius. But and I got nothing to back this up on. But I'm thinking, well, the larger radiuses will be more gentle on the groove because there's more surface contact area, but the same amount of force. But the one that I'm playing that does currently have a 30 micron radius, it also has a tracking force of 1.2. So, give and take.